Hi class, in this video I will be showing you how to conduct two types of t-tests, a single sample t-test and an independent sample t-test. Let's first conduct a one sample t-test. A one sample t-test is used when you want to compare the mean of a sample to that of a mean of a population. So let's say that I want to compare the mean of our midterm score for this 3020 class to that of the average midterm score of all Cal State LA students. So, in front of me, I have 40 hypothetical scores. Please note that these scores are completely made up and have no relationship to your actual midterm or exam scores. So, in order to conduct a one sample t-test, all we have to do is just input the score in a straight column. So, in this column, I have our midterm scores. Okay, to actually conduct the test, we have to go to Analyze. We're going to be comparing means, and then we're going to be using a one sample t-test. So, our testing variable in this case will be midterm scores, as we want to compare our class average to that of the average of all 3020 Cal State LA students. Let's say that the average of all 3020 Cal State LA students' midterm score is 36. So for testing value, we will be putting in 36. This will represent the population mean. So if we go to option, we can see the confidence interval that we are currently testing at. By default, it should be 95%. But if you want to be more stringent, you can raise this to, for example, 99%. But in our case, let's just leave this as a default of 95%. So what does that mean? That means that for every value that exceeds a p of 0.05, we'll be rejecting the null hypothesis. Okay, let's actually conduct a test. So we'll press OK. Notice how our SPSS automatically generates the descriptive statistics. So the mean average of our midterm score is a 30.97 or 31. So SPSS will then compare that value to the hypothetical value of the population, which in this case is 36. Notice that we have a negative t, and the sig value lies at 0.003. This is less than 0.05, which means that we do reject the null hypothesis. And unfortunately, since it falls below on the lower boundary, that means that our class actually performed worse than the average of all midterm students, which is quite unfortunate. Okay. Now let's say that I want to examine the difference between students that took their exam online and students that took their exam offline. For this analysis, we'll be using an independent sample t-test, as we want to examine the difference between two mean groups for the same sample. So, in order to do that, we have to assign the value for our t-test. So let's set up our exam types. So let's go to value, click on the ellipse, and we'll be assigning the value of 1 for students that took the exam in class. So value of 1, label in class, add. And then the value of 2 for students that took the exam online. So value of 2, label online, add, and click OK. So as always, we have to define a variable such that we can type in our data. Let's just name this exam1, or score exam type and scores 1, such that this represents scores for the first exam. As always, remember to define your scale of measurement. In this case, all data that are continuous variables is always scale. Okay. Well, let me quickly show you a hypothetical exam scores. All right. So what do we do with these scores? Well, first we have to assign the value that the scores are associated with. So notice how the first 20 scores represent scores that scored where students took the exam in class, whereas the next 20 represent scores where students took the exam online. So let's click on this real quick and notice that I assigned a value of 1 for all students that took the exam in class. And then I assigned a value of 2 for the scores of all students that took the exam online. This will allow SPSS to associate which type of students belong in each group. Okay, now on to the actual analysis. Go to Analyze. Once again, we'll be comparing means. This time around, we'll be using an independent sample t-test. So, for our testing variable, let's examine scores for exam 1 this time. And in the grouping variable is the values that we defined earlier. This will allow SPSS to associate each exam score with the appropriate exam type. So drag this over here, define group. So group 1, to keep it simple, I assigned a value of 1. So group 1 will be 1 for in class, and group 2 will be 2 for online. Note that you can assign any value such that the value matches what you inputted in variable view. So continue. Okay. So notice that SPSS will calculate the descriptive once again for both classes. So for students that took the exam in class, they had a mean of 14.1, whereas students that took the exam online had a mean of 13.8. Now, if we just look at the descriptive statistics alone, we would assume that people that took the exam in class performed better than the students that took the exam online. That may be true to an extent, but is that statistically significant to the point where it matters? Let's look at the independent sample t-test in order to examine this. So, we notice that we have a significant value of 0.817, which actually greatly exceeds the sig value of 0.05. That means that there is not really a statistically significant difference between the two types of exam scores. Remember that in order to reject the null, we have to have a value that is below that of 0.05, such as when we examined the midterm score, we had a significant value of 0.003 that is less than a value of 0.05. Our current significance value is 0.817, which means that there is not enough evidence that we can say there is a statistically significant difference between the performance of the students in the two different types of exam. Another way to look at this, to look at the 95% confidence interval. If the lower boundary and upper boundary do not cross 0, then it is statistically significant. However, if the lower boundary crosses 0 when approaching the upper boundary, that means that it is insignificant and that we are unable to reject the null hypothesis. In this case, 0.196 does cross the boundary of 0. Therefore, this is not significant. test, and we can say that regardless of whether students take the exam in class or online, it will perform about the same. Okay, that's all on how to conduct a one sample t-test and an independent sample t-test. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay safe.